Whether you view him as a founding father, or as the founder of the University of Virginia, or as our third president, Thomas Jefferson has had a lasting and continuous impact in American history. He has a legacy, an image, a level of heroism, of intellectual ability that we envy in America. Thomas Jefferson truly is, an amazing person, somewhat like Leonardo da Vinci's Renaissance man. But even with such great accomplishments and such a great legacy, there are concepts, there are contrasts that exist when talking about Thomas Jefferson. So, what I'm going to cover over the next few minutes here are some of those accomplishments, and with some of those accomplishments, some of the contrasts, some of the conflict that exists with those accomplishments of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson is widely known as the writer and drafter of the Declaration of Independence. In a lot of American folklore and mythology, he is considered to be the only writer of the Declaration of Independence, and that he went through numerous drafts in order to get the Declaration where it wanted to be. But even with this great accomplishment, for he was considered to be a major, mouthpiece, major frontman for the Declaration. With this accomplishment, there does exist some controversy and some contrast. Jan Lewis and Peter Onuff state that much of the research they found shows that he truly was not the only writer of the Declaration of Independence, and they've said that he's much more like an architect of the document, or even a draftsman, as it says, as in that's somebody who writes something with someone else kind of dictating to them, or showing them how to write or what to say. And even he's been considered in the same writing as simply a scribe, or as someone playing a lead part in a performance or ensemble of chamber music. So the idea or the concept that we have of Jefferson as the only writer of the Declaration is in fact false, and may very well not be true. He in fact was someone who was led along with other men to create the Declaration of Independence. At least that's what much of the recent research has shown. So even in this accomplishment, there exists controversy and there exists contrasts. Another great accomplishment of Thomas Jefferson is the founding of the University of Virginia. UVA is one of the chief schools in the United States. It was back then, and it still is now. And I really haven't found much controversy in the founding of this university. But what really sticks out to me is that on Jefferson's list of accomplishments, this one pretty much is one of the main ones. And I think that in itself is a pretty awesome concept, that founding this great university to him was one of the best accomplishments in his life. Of the numerous things that he had done, he put this on his own tombstone, and that being the father of this university to himself was a great and awesome accomplishment. Another major accomplishment that shows forth the image of Thomas Jefferson is the passing ratification of the 1786 Virginia Statute of Religious Freedoms. Now, this was a series of bills that was passed under the leadership of Thomas Jefferson that, to many, separated the church from the state. The constant and the normal interpretation of this law is that it separated the state and the church, and in a lot of cases, it's still pushed forward today. But even with that being a great accomplishment, that necessarily was not exactly what the law stressed. What the statute and these bills stressed was that religion had to be a lot more accommodating. Daniel Dreisbach, he wrote about this in one of his articles, and he stressed that these laws were not meant to necessarily create a giant separation between the church and the state, but more or less to make the state more accommodating for people of different religious beliefs. Um, it included bills that people didn't have to pay for church they didn't go to. And it pretty much said that even if you don't believe in God, that you cannot be persecuted or that you cannot be negatively impacted by the government or by any such groups. So while many see it as an item that separated the powers of the church and the state, that's not necessarily the case. This great accomplishment again shows forth contrast in that the vision that Thomas Jefferson had for it is not necessarily the vision that we champion it for today. It's meant to make government more accommodating, to allow for people who are of different religious beliefs, who may have no religious belief, to still serve in government, to still be involved without having to be impacted by any other religious intolerance or any other group trying to restrict them because of their belief systems. The concept that truly provides the biggest contrast in Thomas Jefferson is his stance on slavery. Um, Thomas Jefferson, in many's mindset, is a man who's all about freedom, whether it was through the Religious Freedom Act, whether it was through the Declaration of Independence itself. Everyone always views, or most people view, Thomas Jefferson as someone who supported the idea that all men were created equal. And for the most part, this indeed was the case. But when it comes to the topic of slavery, what we'll begin to see as Thomas Jefferson gets older is that he becomes more and more silent concerning the topic of slavery and the rights of slaves. He truly began as someone stressing equality for all men, even as far as to call the slave trade an execrable commerce, this assemblage of horrors, a cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty. So Jefferson kind of began with that mindset, and even in the Declaration of Independence, according to most accounts, when his early drafts or the early drafts that were presented, pretty much uh, kind of said that slavery was for the most part wrong. But as we all know, as it went on, it got kind of manipulated, kind of changed to where slavery was considered to be something okay. Henry Weincheck in the Dark Side of Thomas Jefferson portrays this Jefferson who, though he wanted freedom for others and for all, he never freed his slaves. Um, and this in itself is an interesting concept because he had in his lifetime over 600 slaves, and not once did he free any of them, which for the most part goes against many of his ideas, many of the ideas expressed in the Declaration of Independence, which for the most part would make him seem, according to Weincheck, as a man who's very hypocritical. And to even make matters worse, it is believed that in order to build this beautiful mansion of Monticello, that Thomas Jefferson actually used his slaves as collateral, which further, seems to disprove his belief system and it shows slaves as property, which many other states saw slaves as. So while he was a man of many accomplishments, and while the Declaration of Independence that he was a part of stressed the idea of all men being created equal and of freedom, in his actions we see a major contrast and controversy. In his early writings, in his early drafts, he wanted freedom for all men. And even as I said, as to call slavery a horrible situation that was against human rights in general, we see that even with this being the case, he continued to stand by slavery and continued to keep himself involved in that commercial in that commerce. So as I stated before, Jefferson is a man of many accomplishments, a man that we can all look at it as an icon for American society and freedom and the pursuit of happiness and liberty and all those major concepts. But even with each accomplishment, there exists a level of controversy and contrast. And we'll continue to see this in Jefferson, a man who stood for American freedom, but who, for the most part, did not stand for freedom for all. But he is still a great American hero. Thank you.